All right, so this was interesting. This perked my attention. Florida AD Scott Strickland, as the SEC meetings continue down in Destin, Florida, he says that we have a good relationship with our friends in Tallahassee. No school has a veto in this league. If you get 3/4 of the league and support expansion, we're going to expand. Anybody who made our league better, we'd be supportive of joining the SEC. He mentioned even back when they made the cases for Arkansas, South Carolina, A&M, Missouri, then Texas and OU. Paul Catalina, why would he go out and say this? Is this just in case we will love you to join the conference, but we know you're probably not going to?
Well, first of all, the Florida State, like if you had the election this year, Big Ten versus everybody else, then FSU people would say Big Ten. That's where they want to be because they're mad at the SEC because Greg Sankey, did everything he could to keep them out of the playoff and was successful last year. And then, on top of that, I don't think there's a huge push to want to be in the conference with Florida. I just think that's a fan base thing. But also you say it because people are going to keep asking you about it. But also it puts there's a narrative out there that says, Florida doesn't want them in the league or that South Carolina wouldn't want Clemson. And to that, Texas A&M can say, we didn't want Texas, and we were completely overruled. So Scott Strickland here is just laying out the format for which, if FSU is in, if Florida is the only one who says they don't want them, well, it doesn't really matter what Florida thinks at all.
They're going to go in. Craig?
Yeah, I think the same thing. I don't know how the topic of conversation came up if he was just asked about it. I mean, that might have been why it was brought up to begin with, or if he just offered it up freely. I'd imagine he was probably asked about it.
I think he was asked, yeah.
Yeah, in responding to that, I'm sure he was prepared for those types of questions, given all the stuff that's swirling around right now with the ACC and Florida State. And I think his opinion doesn't really matter. Like Paul just said, I don't think it really matters what Scott Strickland thinks about Florida State joining the SEC. The same way it didn't matter what Texas A&M thought, to his point. But he gave the political answer and didn't give Florida State any ammunition to say, see, they want to prevent us from getting into the league.
Yep.
He gave the diplomatic response, which then did what? It rubbed Florida fans the wrong way because they're getting a little fed up with Scott Strickland, it seems like. And I think Scott Strickland probably signs his receipts with like SS, like as dollar signs. I think the money is all that matters to Scott Strickland ultimately. And so if Florida State was going to bring more money to the SEC, I think that would be more up his alley than any concerns about them biting into the pie of the Gators or anything along those lines. I think that he sees how it would be beneficial, especially financially, to have a school like that, a rivalry like that within the confines of the SEC. I mean, you've already got Oklahoma and Texas, for example. You got Texas A&M. You've got Florida, Alabama. You've got so many of these great rivalries. Why not add another one on top of that? Now, I also think he is in a position, as some people in the comments to one of the tweets that I saw pointed out, where he probably knows it's not likely, so he can be the diplomatic guy and say that and not come across as the Florida guy who's trying to prevent FSU from coming to the league. He knows that there's probably not the strong percentages lie in that area anyways. So, yeah, sure, we'd welcome them, knowing full well that they're probably going to the Big Ten. So he doesn't look like the bad guy. So I think there was some politicking going on with his answer. Nothing to make too much of it. But, again, I find the most curious responses to be those who think that he actually was going to do anything to stop it if that's, in fact, what Greg Sankey or Florida State wanted to do.
We've learned that about the SEC. By the way, A&M's AD did not get that opportunity to answer that question anywhere because it was such a blindside deal.
Just woke up in the morning and that's how it was.
Would love to have been able to have someone, though, ask him that a year or two prior and just see what he would have said then. Like, that's not even a possibility. Strickland, by the way, did make it clear that there have not been any conversations. No one's had any conversations. This is a scenario where somebody walks in and says, here's the school, here's what we have. So it's not as if they've had, now maybe they have had, I don't know, but it's not like it's been on the agenda.
Well, no, I mean, it can't be on the agenda because it's not real yet. It's just now in theory. So before they even have to put it up, like, why put it on the agenda when they're still lawyers to lawyer in all these things and judgments to be made? I mean, you can have little backup plans, and I'm sure Greg Sankey has several maps of like, all right, plan A, okay, plan B, come on down. Like that's how it would be. But also, here's the thing. It's almost lose-lose for Scott Strickland, anything other than this, and he even lost a little bit in this. Of what he was like, no, because then it's going to be, like Craig said, oh, they're afraid.
Oh, you're trying to
they're
back,
afraid.
yeah.
They're keeping them out. This is the least amount of ammunition that he can give people. And if the worst thing he can do is...
So by being honest, although a politically answer, by being honest, he gets drilled.
Yeah, if the worst bullets he has to take are from the angriest of Florida fans who never want Florida State in the conference, then that's fine. There's plenty of them that probably do. I don't know. I mean, I would assume the same thing.
I don't see why Texas wouldn't want Florida State and Clemson in the SEC. It doesn't really affect them. Oklahoma, I think you're just bringing in better teams. I can see where South Carolina would have an issue. I'd see where Florida would have an issue, much like A&M would have had an issue. But, again, we just have to point to A&M and say they went completely around them and they were irrelevant in the decision-making process when it came to Texas and Oklahoma. Now, they're not a day one member, so I can see where maybe you think an older school like a Florida would have more say, but I doubt it, especially as you grow larger. Your say gets less and less, if anything, right? Because the room gets bigger. So I think if you're any SEC team, you know you're never going to be hurting for money. You also, I don't think, want to be like 24 schools because there is too big. There becomes a situation where the leagues just get ridiculously large. I think the Big Ten's already like playing around with that total right now.
What are they, 18 or 20?
18.
Yeah.
And I think that's like pushing it. But I think if you were, in the SEC, sure, more competition, maybe more mouths to feed, all that, but you're not hungry by any means. You got leftovers every night, and I understand in this new era you're going to need every penny, so to speak, but I don't think money is going to be the issue in these decision-making processes for the SEC at least, and I think that if you're just looking at the big picture, I don't know about going and adding like Virginia and, NC State or just some of these schools where it feels like you're not really additive, but Florida State and Clemson, just because of the rivalries and the history and the geography, I think that would be a pretty incredible conference.
And football.
In football, yes.
All right, so there we are with that. I do still, back to the Texas and Oklahoma deal that with Brett Zerneman, he was leaked that story. Now, depends on who you ask, and Brent kind of gave us that background a year after it all happened, but don't you still think that there's a way the SEC or Sankey could have given them at least a glimpse of what was about to be announced? But the problem is they weren't ready to announce it. Remember, that was supposed to be still shrouded. And then all of a sudden, Zerneman gets the story. And so A&M knew because someone gave it to him.
Yeah. Well, Brent told them. I mean, like, that's the thing is Brent Zwerneman told them.
And they're like, what? And so there we are with that. Now, speaking of
I think
A&M,
the thing that Scott Strickland said worse was when he said friends. I think that's what bothered people the most based on what I saw. Our friends in Tallahassee, people did not take kindly to that.
Our little honey buddies, right? Trev Alberts, I love this quote. I'm not all what he did at Nebraska and then moved to A&M. I don't, that didn't bother me at all. I just hate the fact he was a player there and left, but they seem to have a pretty good one, it appears, in Troy Denon. So, Trev Alberts, this is a great quote to me. It's about the SEC spring meetings and also the money and expenses and all that. We've just always had enough increased revenue to overcome dumb expenses. I've said it 100 times. I'll say it again. We don't have a revenue problem in college athletics. We have an expense problem.
Yes. And look, we could get into the weeds about certain teams and how they have travel budgets and different things like that, but that's really a drop in the bucket compared to this graphic right here. When you see what's a dumb expense, and Trev Alberts knows because he is now the shepherd of this dumb expense. But Jack, throw up the buyouts here. They have $77 million paying to this coach that he's not coaching anymore because they made a dumb two different dumb contracts to him. Two different dumb contracts to Jimbo Fisher. Yep. They double down. And then you see the other big buyouts of, Tom Herman and $15 million, and Auburn and $20 million to Gus, and Charlie Weiss's $18.9, and how bad all those schools looked when you said, like, oh man, they got to pay out $20 million or $15 million to their coach. Well, the expense problem of $77 million, like, that's almost all those others combined.
That's not just Fisher, is it? There could
No,
be some assistants are also a
But
part
yeah,
of it.
but $77 million they're going to buy out.
So 3 times, more than 3 times the next in charge when it comes to the buyout top 5.
If I was a Florida State fan, I would have skipped over the Willie Taggart one too, Paul.
Oh, yeah. I thought
I'm sure that was just totally
Yeah.
unintentional.
Yeah.
But how about $4 million for Trev Albert's buyout from Nebraska?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, there's a lot of money that just gets set on fire, and they used to just, set that on fire with amenities in their athletic facilities, and now most of them are caught up, and so they don't really have that outlet to go down that pathway, so it's stadium work or it's this or that. Now, recruiting visits, you're not spending as much in theory because you're not getting all the bells and whistles that you used to. Now, I don't know how many thousands of dollars you racked up in cookie cakes. I don't think those really make a difference, or streamers or whatever, decorate
We are a big fan
rooms.
of cookie cakes in this family.
Yeah, so it's definitely a sport where they waste a lot of money, and they're only going to be making more money in the SEC. So it'll be interesting to see how that's all sort of balanced. Now, clearly, a lot of it's going to be going to the players, and more so than ever before. But yeah, he's onto something, and he should know. He's experienced it firsthand, and he experienced seeing money set on fire just recently when he made the move to College Station. So
and he was there. They were going through a transition when Scott Frost was fired, and I think Frost got some money. I'm not sure exactly how that worked out, but yeah, he's seen that where he has been. Now, Travis Goff is a rising star when it comes to college athletics. KU has given him an extension. They're in really good shape, man. Their basketball team's as good as anybody year in and year out. They've got Bill Self, and, of course, now they also have, they have a guy named Lance Leipold who's doing a pretty good job. A lot of people want. Kansas is redoing their stadium, although that's been tweaked a little bit. Travis Goff with a nice chunk and an extension to his contract.
Well, to get football to where it's now, it was always making revenue because it was football. But to get it to where you have fans excited about football, you have fans donating to a football renovation project, and, you've got that done. That alone gets your you an extension. Donations are at an all-time high. And look, after this last year, the NIL for the basketball program took a huge step forward in a program that I'm going to call Never Again because that was not going to be a year where they were happy with the way they finished, and Travis Goff navigated that really well. And so because of that, give him an extension. Try to keep him away from somebody else. If you can get Kansas fans not only going to football games, but excited about football and convinced that they have a shot to win the conference title now in the new Big 12, that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, they've done a great job.
I'm always leery when I see 7-year deals in college sports because those never seem to last their lifetime, but I think that makes a lot of sense because then you obviously have a buyout that's going to be substantial, you would think, at least with a contract that length. So if somebody were to come calling, which I imagine some people have, and if they stay on the same trajectory, I imagine many more will, to gauge his interest in heading to wherever, then I think Kansas, in theory, should be secured with this new deal pretty well. And also just the security of having him locked down like that in general. It's a huge commitment on the part of the school, and it's a huge commitment on the part of Travis Goff to sign that extension. So I think it's just another patch of good news for KU, which has seen a lot of that here lately, and particularly with the momentum the football program has. The basketball programs, pretty much impossible to derail, really. But certainly people have tried, and they are still just steady Eddie with Bill Self, and to have the football component now working as well as it is, so long as they can keep that together, KU's in really, really good shape. And they're a school that gets brought up as, all right, beyond Florida State and Clemson, who would be the next wave? I don't know how many more waves we've got, guys.
Yeah.
I know there's more to come, but I don't know realistically how many waves we're talking about, but you would think that if there were a couple more, then maybe KU gets involved somewhere there. But regardless, they're set up really well for whatever is coming down the pipeline, whether that's, the Big 12 and trying to grab the horns of the conference and be the lead dog now in many ways, or if that's, bettering yourself and then having an opportunity down the line to join one of the other two. they're going to be set with the what do you call it, the alignment that they've now created over these past few years. So, yeah, they're in a good spot.
When the AD and football coach are all on the same page, it's a good thing. And because when you get an AD change, even if the football coach is successful or vice versa, you never know how things can go south. Lincoln Riley, this story by Saturday Down South, is USC opens up against LSU. And according to this story, USC was trying to get out of this game in Vegas. There was the story that when Lincoln Riley took the job at USC, it's because he wanted to avoid the SEC. Now, whether that's true, he's a great football coach, although last year obviously was a disappointment. This year might be a little bit of a reload for them, although we will see that. It's not a good look if it's true. It's not a good look even if it's not true. And these are the games, to me, that I love about college football.
Well, it's also the games you're going to need to play now because you're going to need to win, or you're going to need, like, if one of your losses is that game and it was a good game,
yes,
you're going to need
against a highly ranked opponent. Good
wins and good losses when you start sorting out, especially if you're not, like, I guess if you're USC, you can assume you're going to win the Big Ten. But I don't know why they should do that. They haven't won their Pac-12 in quite a while. So,
dude, they're borderline top 5 maybe in the Big Ten next year. Like, they just lost Caleb freaking Williams. What are they about to do? I mean, hey, you had a good performance in a bowl game. Who gives a damn? Like, they're walking into Ohio State and Michigan. I know Michigan's got to reload, but I mean, Penn State, Oregon, Washington. I mean, Washington's got to reload as well. Oregon's got to some extent. But, yeah, I mean, I don't think they're even guaranteed top 5 based on everything that we know.
Well, last year in their own conference that they were in the Pac-12 with about. Caleb Williams. Yeah.
So
you have Michigan, Texas, Georgia, Clemson, Notre Dame, A&M, Miami, and Florida. And then you have this. That's, to me, what I love about the first week or two of college football. You have also Muleshoe State against somebody else. But I just,
you brought up Muleshoe because of Lincoln Riley, I know. But I
swear to God, I wasn't thinking that way, but I guess AI put that in my...
Subliminally, you were obviously thinking that way. You don't randomly pull out Muleshoe and talk about Lincoln Riley.
I was going to say Moorhead, but I didn't want to hurt Moorhead State.
But I think Lincoln Riley has these little, and it doesn't affect my opinion of him as an on-field coach, but he's got these little, like, missteps that happen
Bitch fits.
What?
These little bitch fits kind of in a way.
Yeah. Getting mad at a guy who's in his first literal month of his first job of his life, and he talked to a player on the, and he's out. And it's like, you could tell him, like, hey, could you kind of follow this process? We prefer that. And then you keep it professional as opposed to, like, darn you 22-year-old snake, and throwing him out there. And then, of course, the brisket thing. And the fish thing.
The brisket thing is something he'll never overcome.
I mean, he shouldn't.
He will never overcome.
Look, if you're going to kill a cow, you should at least respect its honor by cooking it well.
Yeah, well, I mean, the gist of this was, because I don't think we really touched on it, we kind of talked around it, but he was trying to get out of the USC-LSU game at the beginning of the year. He went he went pretty quickly to his AD, tried to start working around that. There were obviously some changes at the top and whatnot, so you were navigating some of that, but went through the networks, tried to get the networks involved in getting this changed, and ultimately all of those efforts were failed efforts because nobody was interested in moving this game or changing this game besides Lincoln Riley and maybe the people at USC that were supporting him in that effort. But beyond that, it doesn't sound like anybody else came close to even flinching on this game. So the reasons are mysterious. We don't really know the full reasons as to why, other than you're just avoiding to, possibly get beat up early on in the season or lose to an SEC team, and that's a blemish or whatever other reasons he might have. But it's just another little blip that you just kind of think a little bit less maybe of Lincoln Riley. I think some people, with the whole handling of his Oklahoma situation, he lost a lot of fans, obviously. I, as an Oklahoma fan, didn't like it, but I also felt that was very college football. Like, that is nothing new, or just like, I didn't become one of those people who's like, but he said, it's like, Yeah, he's a college football coach. They all lie. They lie to do whatever they can to get what they want. And so that is across the board. I don't care who you are. They do what they want to get what they want. And so I never trusted Lincoln Riley to begin with. Did I think he'd leave Oklahoma the way he did? No, absolutely not. But I didn't really begin to hate the guy for that. But I do feel like he's had missteps along the way that just have kind of added up and have painted him in a different light.
He needs to win.
And he needs to win.
I mean, he's won, but he needs to surprise some people
He's
this year.
put more of a pressure on himself than I think was really there now, because now you've got, everybody who is on the Oklahoma side of things, or just people who don't like Lincoln Riley, who now are like loving that the pressure's ratcheting it up a little bit. All right, let's see what you do post Caleb Williams. Oh, now you're trying to get out of a game against LSU. So you are scared of the SEC, like people have always said, and so on and so forth. So there's a little bit of that reputation building up, and the only way to cure that is to go beat LSU. But
you wonder if he would have done that if Williams was back.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, he's got, what do you call them, Craig? What do you call those little fits? Bitch fits?
It's called a little bitch fit, yeah. I feel like that's what they are. They're little bitchy things that just crop up from time to time, it seems like, with him. And it's kind of become not a pattern, but it's just something where I feel like his reputation is like taking little dings here and there, and a lot of it's been self-inflicted. And so he's looked at it in a little bit of a different light for me. And not just solely because of the USC switch up, but I think across the country he's looked at it like not as much of a ferocious, the future of head coaching in college football, but like, this guy's kind of a B. You know what I mean?
And look, there's two kinds of lying in college football. There's the normal coach lying, and then there's the coaches that will just say, I don't want to talk about that, which is basically translates for, I can't get this lie out of my mouth without feeling guilty, so I'm not going to talk about this. So.
He's got a little PR work to do. He needs somebody to sit down with him and maybe tell him. Two different lies. I like that.
He needs the speech that I think a lot of people in life need. If he walked in and listed the problems of I've got a 22-year-old porter I was mad at, and I want to get out of this game, and I want to do this and this and this, and then he's going to be like, man, who cares? Who cares? Don't worry about that. You have enough to worry about. You've got to recruit, and you've got to help raise funds, and you've got to do all these things, and you've got to still be the most brilliant quarterback coach in the country, and all these things. So all this other stuff that comes at you, who cares?
Yeah. All right, let's go to the Scotty Scheffler story, because we have Don McPherson, former great at Syracuse, College Football Hall of Famer, joining us via Zoom at around 3:30 today. Charges, you could see this coming. I kept waiting. And then there would be something else. And today there was an audio clip on video of another police officer the morning that he was arrested by the Louisville Police Department, going back and forth and kind of discussing what was going on. This was a bad deal from the time it happened. Could Scotty Scheffler have done a couple of things differently? Sure. The charges have been dropped. He does not want to press charges. He wants to move on. He probably could and win, but this thing is finally, at least for now. Now the question is, what does Louisville Police Department do with Sergeant Gillis and anyone else? But that story, at least for that part of it, comes to an end.
Probably paid leave and pat on the butt for getting them in the headlines, even though it's bad press. I don't know. Maybe I'm assuming the worst, but I don't know. I watched the video. I don't like. And this, I know there's a lot of people who be like, that's every cop. I don't believe that. I believe there are plenty of good cops out there, but I hate cops on power trips. I absolutely hate it. And I felt like there was a lot of that going on. I do feel like Scotty kind of misspoke a couple times. And definitely it wasn't as clear, black and white, as it was portrayed to be, as though he did nothing wrong and said nothing wrong. And clearly when he's talking to one of the cops, the cop, he's like, why didn't you listen to the guy in the jacket? And he kind of
he thought he was a security guard.
He thought it was a security guard. He's like, well, why, if you thought it was a security guard, why didn't you stop for him? So that got to be a little bit confusing and kind of an area where you could see where maybe Scotty should have listened to that guy in the yellow jacket, even if he was just a security guard. But that's really that's not a big thing in the long run, and it didn't need to turn into what it turned into. And I do think the cop who kicked all this off was on a power trip. The way you see him run over the car and slam the window with whatever he was holding. Flashlight. I mean, that was BS. That was BS. There was no need for that. This cop, if you look at his history, has had incident after incident after incident, and he's still on the job and will continue to be on the job. And I find all that to just be disgusting. But Scotty probably didn't do himself any favors with a couple of his answers, but it was not a huge deal in the long run.
His attorney was saying that he was being misled by the questioning of the police officer talking to him, which is why you don't maybe say anything.
Right, exactly. And they're talking to you to get you to keep talking and to potentially incriminate yourself. So, yeah, the best advice is to not say anything. And so, yeah, I think there was an element of that as well. I think in the long run, big picture, Louisville PD looks stupid, and rightfully so. And I think Scotty Scheffler maybe learned a lesson just in terms of how you deal with cops, maybe, if he has to do that in the future. But ultimately, this was blown way out of proportion. And I think it's a bad look for Louisville PD more than anything else. And I think it's only right that the charges are dropped, and they should have been. And I'm glad to see that, and I'm not surprised whatsoever based on all the information that we had.
Don McPherson.